First Things, episode number 59.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Try to be perfect. We try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. It is great to be back with you again today as we're going to pick up where we left off on our Essentialism study. We are going to be reviewing Chapter 7 of Essentialism by Greg McKeown, which is on the issue of play. Before we get started on that, I wanted to remind you about a survey that I have going on right now for those who listen to my show. This survey is very short, 10 questions. It's completely anonymous. You don't have to give me any information about who you are unless you choose to. Completely optional, totally free. And I would greatly appreciate if you would consider taking 5 or 10 minutes out of your time to do this survey. And this is a global survey, by the way. So I would appreciate comments and opinions from all over the world. Now, you can go to firstthingsproductivity.com/5959, and there will be a link to that survey in the show notes. But you can also just go straight to firstthingsproductivity.com/survey. And if you go to firstthingsproductivity.com/survey, it will take you straight to that survey. And again, I would just really appreciate any help with this because I want to hear back from you guys. I want to hear what your thoughts are. And so far, I've only had 3 people take this survey. So I would definitely love to have more people. I would love to have a couple hundred people have taken this survey by the end of September. And I'll quit bugging you about it if you'll go take it. Because I just really want to know what's on your mind, what things you're thinking about, and would love to hear from you about that. So please consider going and taking that survey. Also, I wanted to thank 2 listeners who left me some comments recently on iTunes. And they were my first ever comments left in Russia and in Canada. So from Russia, Vadim mentioned, thank you for such great motivation and knowledge you share in the podcast. It helps a lot. And then Researcher for Life from Canada just wanted to let you know that I listened to your podcast and found them very insightful and helpful in my journey. You mentioned you hadn't had viewers comment from Canada, so here's one for you. Thank you both, because I love hearing from the listeners of the show. And you guys were both the very first ones who ever left a comment for me in this show in Canada and Russia. And there's still a lot of open opportunities for you guys in other countries that listen to this show. Australia, Canada, Russia, UK, and the US are the only countries that I've had leave me comments. So if you're in another country besides that, then I would love to hear from you. Also, remember that I do have a personal email. I'm not going to make it too easy to see on my website for fear of spam, but you can reach me at me@brandonvaughn.com, VAUGHN, V as in Victor. You can reach me directly through there. I'm working to get that up on my website, so you can click and send me a quick email from there, and it'll send it straight to that address, as well as working up, trying to get a mailing list open up so that if you are a fan of the show and you like some of the stuff I talk about, that you can keep in touch with me. I can keep in touch with you. And also I'm writing some new things. So I'm really planning out some new things that are going on, and it's going to be coming to you fairly quickly. So I was thinking about the topics we're going to be covering up pretty soon. We're going to finish up this Essentialism study. It's going to take us a few more weeks to finish up this study. And then we're going to go into another series and a book study on how we learn. And I've recently been looking over some of this stuff and found it fascinating how we learn best. And we're going to talk about that for a little bit. And then at that point, I am going to switch gears and talk about some topics that I am going to be writing a book about. And we're going to discuss this on the show. And I'm going to be giving away some of these chapters for free that you guys can download and read and give me comments on. And probably at the very first start, when I finish this book and release it, then I'll probably give it away for free as well. And you can freely download it, and at some point I'll probably sell it. But it's just going to be a great thing for me, and I'm excited about it. And if you're wondering what topic it's going to be on, I'll tell you about that later. I'm not going to tell you right now. But these are various things that are coming up for us on the show. So let's get into the topic of play. We mentioned this many episodes ago when we were talking about procrastination. We were talking about the now habit. And it's amazing how we forget this lesson as children. When we were children, play was very essential, and it created very healthy environments for us. If you think about the fact that we weren't very stressed out when we were younger, we didn't have a lot of the obstacles that we have as adults. Now, you could chalk that up to the fact that we're adults with responsibilities and bills and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that a big part of that change is the fact that we quit playing when we get older. We see play as very trivial, as a waste of time. It's very unnecessary. It's an obstacle in the way of my productivity. It's an obstacle in the way of me getting to where I want to be in life. And if it's not that negative in our minds, then in the very least, for many of us, it's optional. Very few people, I think, if you ask them about play in their lives as adults, would consider it to be necessary and foundational. For most of us, it would be optional. For many of us, it might even be an obstacle. We should be people that pushes imaginative play. We should be encouraging that in ourselves. We should be encouraging that in our own work. We've said this before, too many companies don't really emphasize it. Some companies give lip service to it, but I have found very few companies that really push that idea. I would love to have a manager or a supervisor or a dean of a college or anyone that would be proactive in making sure that I'm not neglecting this. I would love to have someone come up to me and say, Brandon, I saw you sent that email out on Saturday. Why weren't you taking time for yourself? Why weren't you enjoying and having some recreation? Why weren't you spending time with friends or family? Why did you do this? I don't want to see you do that again. I appreciate that you thought it was very important. I appreciate how responsible you are and how you take your job seriously, but I don't want to see this happen again. You need to have a work-life balance. I would love to just have that happen to me once in my life. And to this date, it has never happened to me. Has it ever happened to you? I'd be real interested if it has. If it has, email me or post up something on Facebook for me so you can tell me about it, because I've never actually ever found a company or a boss for that matter who ever thought that way. But play is very essential, and it is so essential that we can even see scientifically how essential it is. Now, I want to play for you a small clip from a researcher named Stuart Brown, who's going to talk a bit about how play is not just an option. It is so essential to who we are. And he's going to talk a little bit in this about how and why we play, how it is a vital part of our life, how every life form experiences some sort of play, no matter how minimal. So let's listen to some of Dr. Stuart Brown now talk about this very interesting topic.
It's got to be serious if the New York Times puts a cover story of their February 17th Sunday magazine about play. At the bottom of this, it says it's deeper than gender, seriously but dangerously fun, and a sandbox for new ideas about evolution. Not bad. Except if you look at that cover, what's missing? You see any adults? Well, let's go back to the 15th century. This is a courtyard in Europe, and a mixture of 124 different kinds of play. All ages, solo play, body play, games, taunting, and there it is. And I think this is a typical picture of what it was like in a courtyard then. I think we may have lost something in our culture. So I'm going to take you through what I think is a remarkable sequence. North of Churchill, Manitoba, in October and November, there's no ice on Hudson Bay, and this polar bear that you see is 1,200-pound male. He's wild and fairly hungry. And Norbert Rossing, a German photographer, is there on scene making a series of photos of these huskies who are tethered. And from out of stage left comes this wild male polar bear with a predatory gaze. Any of you have been to Africa or had a junkyard dog come after you, there is a fixed kind of predatory gaze that you know you're in trouble. But on the other side of that predatory gaze is a female husky in a play bow wagging her tail. And something very unusual happens. That fixed behavior which is rigid and stereotyped and ends up with a meal, changes. And this polar bear stands over the husky, no claws extended, no fangs, taking a look, and they begin an incredible ballet. A play ballet. This is in nature. It overrides the carnivorous nature and what otherwise would have been a short fight to the death. And if you'll begin to look closely at the husky that's baring her throat to the polar bear, and look a little more closely, they're in an altered state. They're in a state of play. And it's that state that allows these two creatures to explore the possible. They are beginning to do something that neither would have done without the play signals. And it is a marvelous example of how a differential in power can be overridden by a process of nature that's within all of us. Now, how did I get involved in this? John mentioned that I'd done some work with murderers, and I have. The Texas Tower murderer opened my eyes, and in retrospect, when we studied his tragic mass murder, to the importance of play, in that that individual, by deep study, was found to have severe play deprivation. Charles Whitman was his name. And our committee, which consisted of a lot of hard scientists, did feel at the end of that study that the absence of play and a progressive suppression of developmentally normal play led him to be more vulnerable to the tragedy that he perpetrated. And that finding has stood the test of time, unfortunately, even into more recent times at Virginia Tech. And other studies of populations at risk sensitized me to the importance of play, but I didn't really understand what it was. And it was many years in taking play histories of individuals before I really began to recognize that I didn't really have a full understanding of it. And I don't think any of us has a full understanding of it by any means. But there are ways of looking at it that I think can give us all a taxonomy, a way of thinking about it. And this image is, for humans, the beginning point of play. When that mother and infant lock eyes, and the infant's old enough to have a social smile, what happens spontaneously is the eruption of joy on the part of the mother, and she begins to babble and coo and smile, and so does the baby. If we've got them wired up with an electroencephalogram, the right brain of each of them becomes attuned, so that the joyful emergence of this earliest of play scenes and the physiology of that is something we're beginning to get a handle on. And I'd like you to think that every bit of more complex play builds on this base for us humans. And so now I'm going to take you through sort of a way of looking at play, but it's never just singly one thing. We're going to look at body play, which is a spontaneous desire to get ourselves out of gravity. This is a mountain goat. If you're having a bad day, try this. Jump up and down, wiggle around. You're going to feel better. And you may feel like this character, who is also just doing it for its own sake. It doesn't have a particular purpose, and that's what's great about play. If its purpose is more important than the act of doing it, it's probably not play. And there's a whole other type of play, which is object play. And this Japanese macaque is made a snowball, and he or she's going to roll down a hill. And they don't throw it at each other, but this is a fundamental part of being playful. The human hand in manipulation of objects is the hand in search of a brain. The brain is in search of a hand, and play is the medium by which those two are linked in the best way. JPL, we heard this morning, JPL is an incredible place. They have located two consultants, Frank Wilson and Nate Johnson, who are, Frank Wilson's a neurologist, Nate Johnson is a mechanic. He taught mechanics in a high school in Long Beach and found that his students were no longer able to solve problems. And he tried to figure out why, and he came to the conclusion quite on his own that the students who could no longer solve problems such as fix cars hadn't worked with their hands. Frank Wilson had written a book called The Hand. They got together. JPL hired them. Now JPL and NASA and Boeing before they will hire a research and development problem solver, even if they're summa cum laude from Harvard or Caltech. If they haven't fixed cars, haven't done stuff with their hands early in life, played with their hands, they can't problem solve as well. So play is practical, and it's very important. Now, one of the things about play is that it is born by curiosity and exploration. But it has to be safe exploration. This happens to be okay. He's an anatomically interested little boy, and that's his mom. Other situations wouldn't be quite so good. But curiosity, exploration are part of the play scene. If you want to belong, you need social play. And social play is part of what we're about here today and is a byproduct of the play scene. Rough and tumble play. These lionesses, seen from a distance, looked like they were fighting. But if you look closely, they're kind of like the polar bear and husky. No claws, flat fur, soft eyes, open mouth with no fangs, balletic movements, curvilinear movements, all specific to play. And rough and tumble play is a great learning medium for all of us. Preschool kids, for example, should be allowed to dive, hit, whistle, scream, be chaotic, and develop through that a lot of emotional regulation and a lot of the other social byproducts, cognitive, emotional, and physical, that come as a part of rough and tumble play. Spectator play, ritual play, we're involved in some of that. Those of you who are from Boston know that this was the moment, rare, where the Red Sox won the World Series. But take a look at the face and the body language of everybody in this fuzzy picture, and you can get a sense that they're all at play. Imaginative play. I love this picture because my daughter is now almost 40, that's in this picture, but it reminds me of her storytelling and her imagination, her ability to spin yarns at this age, preschool. Really important part of being a player is imaginative solo play. And I love this one because it's kind of also what we're about. We all have an internal narrative that's our own inner story. The unit of intelligibility of most of our brains is the story. I'm telling you a story today about play. Well, this Bushman, I think, is talking about the fish that got away that was, that long, but it's a fundamental part of the play scene. So what does play do for the brain? Well, a lot. We don't know a whole lot about what it does for the human brain because funding has not been exactly heavy for research on play. I walked into the Carnegie asking for a grant. They'd given me a large grant when I was an academician for the study of felony drunken drivers, and I thought I had a pretty good track record, and by the time I had spent half an hour talking about play, it was obvious that they did not feel that play was serious. I think that's a few years back. I think that wave is past and the play wave is cresting because there is some good science. Nothing lights up the brain like play. Three-dimensional play fires up the cerebellum, puts a lot of impulses into the frontal lobe, the executive portion, helps contextual memory to be developed, and. So it's for me, it's been an extremely nourishing, scholarly adventure to look at the neuroscience that's associated with play and to bring together people who, in their individual disciplines, hadn't really thought of it that way. And that's part of what the National Institute for Play is all about. And this is one of the ways you can study play, is to get a 256-lead electroencephalogram. I'm sorry I don't have a playful-looking subject, but it allows mobility, which has limited the actual study of play. And we've got a mother-infant play scenario that we're hoping to complete underway at the moment. The reason I put this here is also to cue up my thoughts about objectifying what play does. The animal world has objectified it. In the animal world, if you take rats who are hardwired to play at a certain period of their juvenile years, and you suppress play, they squeak, they wrestle, they pin each other, that's part of their play. If you stop that behavior on one group that you're experimenting with, and you allow it in another group that you're experimenting with, and then you present those rats with a cat odor-saturated collar, they're hardwired to flee and hide. Not pretty smart. They don't want to get killed by a cat. So what happens? They both hide out, The non-players never come out. They die. The players slowly explore the environment and begin again to test things out. That says to me, at least in rats, and I think they have the same neurotransmitters that we do and a similar cortical architecture, that play may be pretty important for our survival. And. There are a lot more animal studies that I could talk about. Now, this is a consequence of play deprivation. This took a long time. I had to get Homer down and put him through the fMRI and the SPECT and multiple EEGs, but as a couch potato, his brain is shrunk. And we do know that in domestic animals and others, when they're play deprived, they don't develop, and rats also, they don't develop a brain that is normal. Now, the program says that the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. And I think if you think about life without play, no humor, no flirtation, no movies, no games, no fantasy, and. Try and imagine a culture or a life, adult or otherwise, without play. And the thing that's so unique about our species is that we're really designed to play through our whole lifetime. And we all have capacity to play signal. Nobody misses that dog I took a picture of on the Carmel Beach a couple of weeks ago. What's going to follow from that behavior is play, and you can trust it. The basis of human trust is established through play signals, and we begin to lose those signals culturally and otherwise as adults. That's a shame. I think we've got a lot of learning to do. Now, Jane Goodall has here a play face along with one of her favorite chimps. So part of the signaling system of play has to do with vocal, facial, body, gestural. You can tell, and I think when we are getting into collective play, it's really important for groups to gain a sense of safety through their own sharing of play signals. You may not know this word, but it should be your biological first name and last name, because neoteny means the retention of immature qualities into adulthood. And we are, by physical anthropologists, by many, many studies, the most neotenous, the most youthful, the most flexible, the most plastic of all creatures, and therefore the most playful. And this gives us a leg up on adaptability.
Now, I found that very fascinating and very scientific. Love research-based evidence about this. And I don't think I've ever really heard much research-based around play. But there it is. And if you want to go and listen to the rest of Stuart Brown's talk, you can go to firstthingsproductivity.com/59, and I have a link to the video. You can watch it right there on the site. There's a lot more that he talks about that I did not include in that excerpt, and it's a great thing to watch all the way through. Now, here's something the author says from Essentialism. He says, play, which I would define as anything we do simply for the joy of doing rather than as a means to an end, whether it's flying a kite or listening to music or throwing around a baseball, might seem like a non-essential activity. Often it is treated that way, but in fact, play is essential in many ways. Stuart Brown, which we just heard, the founder of the National Institute for Play, has studied what are called the play histories of some 6,000 individuals and has concluded that play has the power to significantly improve everything from personal health to relationships to education to organizations' ability to innovate. Play, he says, leads to brain plasticity, adaptability, and creativity. As he succinctly puts it, nothing fires up the brain like play. So what does a non-essentialist do? A non-essentialist thinks that play is trivial, but the essentialist knows that play is essential. A non-essentialist thinks that play is an unproductive waste of time, but an essentialist knows that play sparks exploration and creativity. For most of us, when we are at play, and if we remember times when we're at play, those are the times that we usually have the best memories, where we feel the most alive, where we're most embracing the now moment. Albert Einstein once said, "When I examine myself and my methods of thought, I come to the conclusion that the gift of fantasy has meant more to me than my talent for absorbing positive knowledge." Now, what's interesting about stress is that stress shuts down our creativity. I don't really think that needs to be proven by anyone, but just in case I want us to hear another excerpt from Tim Brown. And in this short excerpt, Tim is going to talk about the powerful relationship between creative thinking and play. And he's going to give some examples that you can actually try at home. I'm not going to play the entire speech by Tim, but I'm going to play a little bit of this. And again, you can go and watch the whole speech at firstthingsproductivity.com/59. I would definitely encourage you to watch. You really need to see his speech and some of the crazy things that he does. But just to, again, immerse ourselves in the fact that we need play in order to stir up creative thinking in our lives.
So the average Western first grader spends as much as 50% of their playtime taking part in what's called construction play. Construction play it's playful, obviously, but also a powerful way to learn. When play is about building a tower out of blocks, the kid begins to learn a lot about towers. And as they repeatedly knock it down and start again, learning is happening as a sort of byproduct of play. It's classically learning by doing. Now, when David Kelly calls this behavior, when it's carried out by designers, thinking with your hands. And it typically involves making multiple low-resolution prototypes very quickly, often by bringing lots of found elements together in order to get to a solution. One of his earliest projects, the team was kind of stuck, and they came up with a mechanism by hacking together a prototype made from a roll-on deodorant. Now, that became the first commercial computer mouse for the Apple Lisa and the Macintosh. So they kind of learnt their way to that by building prototypes. Another example is as a group of designers were working on a surgical instrument with some surgeons, and they were meeting with them. They were talking to the surgeons about what it was they needed with this device. And one of the designers ran out of the room and grabbed a whiteboard marker and a film canister, which is now becoming a very precious prototyping medium, and a clothespin, taped them all together, ran back into the room and said, "You mean something like this?" And the surgeons could grab hold of it and said, "Well, I want to hold it like this or like that." And all of a sudden, a productive conversation was happening about design around a tangible object. And in the end, it turned into, a real device. And so this behavior is all about quickly getting something into the real world and having your thinking advanced as a result. At IDEO, there's a kind of a back to preschool feel sometimes about the environment. The prototyping carts, filled with colored paper and Play-Doh and glue sticks and stuff. I mean, they do have a bit of a kindergarten feel to them. But the important idea is everything's to hand, everything's around. So when designers are working on ideas, they can start building stuff kind of whenever they want. They don't necessarily even have to go into some kind of formal workshop to do it. And we think that's pretty important. And then the sad thing is, although preschools are full of this kind of stuff, as kids go through the school system, it all gets taken away. They lose this stuff that kind of facilitates this sort of playful building mode of thinking. And of course, by the time we get to the average workplace, maybe the best construction tool we have might be the Post-it note. It's pretty barren. But by giving project teams and their clients, whoever they're working with, permission to think with their hands, quite complex ideas can go from spring into life and go right through to execution much more easily. This is a nurse using a very simple, as you can see, kind of plasticine prototype, explaining what she wants out of a portable information system to a team of technologists and designers that are working with her in a hospital. And just having this very simple prototype allows her to talk about what she wants in a much more powerful way. And of course, by building quick prototypes, we can get out and test our ideas with consumers and users much more quickly than if we're trying to describe them through words. But what about designing something that isn't physical? Something like a service or an experience, something which exists as a series of interactions over time. Instead of building play, I think this can be approached with role play. So if you're designing an interaction between two people, such as, ordering a food at a fast food joint or something, you need to be able to imagine how that experience might feel over a period of time. And I think the best way to achieve that and get a feeling for any flaws in your design is to act it out. So we do quite a lot of work at IDEO trying to convince our clients of this. They can be a little skeptical. I'll come back to that. But a place, I think, where the effort is really worthwhile is where people are wrestling with quite serious problems. things like education or security or finance or health. And this is another example in a healthcare environment of some doctors and some nurses and designers acting out a service scenario around patient care. But many adults are pretty reluctant to engage with role play. Some of it's embarrassment, and some of it is because they just don't believe that what emerges is necessarily valid. They dismiss an interesting interaction by saying, that's just happening because they're acting it out. Research into kids' behavior actually suggests that it's worth taking role playing seriously. Because when children play a role, they actually follow social scripts quite closely that they've learned from us as adults. If one kid plays store and another one's playing house, then the whole kind of play falls down. And so they get quite used quite quickly to understanding the rules for social interactions, and actually quite quick to point out when they're broken. So when, as adults, we role play, then we have a huge set of these scripts already internalized. We've gone through lots of experiences in life. And they provide a strong intuition as to whether an interaction is going to work. So we're very good when acting out a solution at spotting whether something lacks authenticity. So role play is actually, I think, quite valuable when it comes to thinking about experiences. Another way for us as designers to explore role play is to put ourselves through an experience which we're designing for, and kind of project ourselves into an experience. So here are some designers who are trying to understand what it might feel like to sleep in a kind of confined space on an airplane. And so they grabbed some very simple materials, you can see, and did this kind of role play, this kind of very crude role play, just to get a sense of what it would be like for passengers if they were kind of stuck in quite small places on airplanes. This is one of our designers, Christian Simsarian, and he's putting himself through the experience of being an ER patient. Now, this is in a real hospital, in a real emergency room. One of the reasons he chose to take this rather large video camera with him, because he didn't want the doctors and nurses thinking that he was actually sick and sticking something into him that he was going to regret later. So anyhow, he went there with this video camera, and it was kind of interesting to see what he brought back, because when we looked at the video when he got back, we saw 20 minutes of this. And that was the amazing thing about this video. As soon as you see it, you can kind of immediately project yourself into that experience and know what it feels like. All of that uncertainty while you're left out in the hallway while the docs are dealing with some more urgent case, in one of the emergency rooms, wondering what the heck's going on. And so this notion of using kind of role play, in this case, kind of living through the experience as a way of creating empathy, particularly when you use video, is really powerful. Or another one of our designers, Alte Sendel, he's here having his chest waxed, not because he's very vain, although actually he is. No, I'm kidding. But in order to empathize with the pain that chronic care patients go through when they're having dressings removed. And so sometimes these kind of analogous experiences, kind of analogous role play, can also be quite valuable. So when a kid dresses up as a firefighter, he's beginning to try on that identity. He wants to know what it feels like to be a firefighter. We're doing the same thing as designers. We're trying on these experiences. And so the idea of role play is both as an empathy tool as well as a tool for prototyping experiences. And, we kind of admire people who do this at IDEO anyway, not just because they lead to insights about the experience, but also because of their willingness to explore and their ability to kind of unself-consciously surrender themselves to the experience. In short, we admire their willingness to play.
So here's something I want to encourage you. If you are ever stressed out, I want you to take a break and go play. Now, it can be very simple. It could be taking a piece of paper out and playing a game of tic-tac-toe or drawing a picture. I want you to embrace your creative side. I want you to write a story. Type a story. I want you to listen to some music and close your eyes and hear it with every piece of your being. Or if you have some coworkers, then do something fun together where you play a game together or go outside and just throw a ball around. I want you to do that the next time you're stressed, especially if you're listening to me and you're telling me that you have a really hard time with stress. And you say, I've tried all sorts of things and tried meditation and different things like that, and it just hasn't worked for me. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to deliberately play and do something that is fun to you when you're really stressed out. If you need to be creative, that's one of the worst things that you can tell somebody. I want you to be creative right now. There's a lot of pressure there to be creative. And the best way to be creative is to not think about it and to go and play and do something else. To let that need to be creative just sit in the back of your mind, percolating like it's some tea that's brewing in the background on the stove. Just leave it alone and let it brew and think about something else, do something else, and you'll find that those things magically seem to take care of themselves. And you'll find these creative sources coming through for you as you just play and relax and quit worrying about stuff so much. Greg McKeown quotes Edward Hallowell, who is a psychiatrist who specializes in brain science. And Hallowell mentions in one of his writings that Columbus was at play when it dawned on him that the world was round. That Newton was at play in his mind when he saw the apple tree and suddenly conceived of the force of gravity. Watson and Crick were playing with possible shapes of the DNA molecule when they stumbled upon the double helix. Shakespeare played, Mozart certainly played. Einstein's thought experiments are brilliant examples of the mind invited to play. Now, there's so many ways that we can put this into action. Certainly, if you work in an office and you work in a cubicle, you should decorate your office. You should make it playful. You should go overboard to make it into an environment that is conducive to what you're trying to do. If you are a musician and you have a home studio, then you need to decorate the entire room and be absorbed with music. If you are a writer, then you need to decorate your writing room full of things that make you think about writing. Doesn't mean you have to put things on walls, but you might want to. You may want to surround yourself with books. You want to give that feeling. You want to absorb yourself in play. We said this during the Now Habit episodes, but you need to deliberately schedule time to play. And in fact, it should be the very first thing that you schedule when you schedule out your week. So before you start scheduling out all your meetings and priorities and projects, you need to schedule in your week. When am I going to play? When am I going to exercise? When am I going to do something fun? And you need to deliberately put them in your calendar, and you need to deliberately keep those obligations to yourself. You need to take care of yourself first, because you'll never be able to take care of other things if you're not taking care of yourself first. There is a movie I would definitely recommend that you buy and watch. It's a kind of a silly, odd movie, and some of you may not like it, but I think it's such a great film on this. I've often wanted to do a whole episode about Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. I wanted to do an episode about life according to Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, and still may at some point in the podcast history. But it's all about the fact that adults grow up, and when they grow up, they quit really seeing how life is. And the story revolves around Dustin Hoffman, who is a magic toy store owner. Natalie Portman is in the movie as well. It's just a really interesting movie that makes you realize that it's okay to play as an adult and to do crazy things sometimes. I will do this occasionally, and I love when I get into these sparks where I am playful and I'm not so serious all the time. I was with my nephews one time during Christmas, and we decided to stop by Barnes & Noble's to look at stuff for some reason. Well, I ran into a book that was called Jammy Time, and it was all about wearing pajamas. It was a kid's book, and I started following around my nephews in the bookstore, reading them this story on Jammy Time. And to this day, we still talk about that and how we hate that we didn't buy that book, because I can't find that book anywhere now. It was on sale. I guess they were trying to get rid of it. And it's a big joke to us to this day. It was a great moment of just kind of goofing off and having fun together, not taking life so seriously. Now, some of those moments like that are very spontaneous, and I'm definitely saying to be on the lookout for those, but also to proactively embrace play in your life, to put it in your schedule, to keep it, and make it a priority to keep. That if someone comes to you, we're going to learn this in future weeks in these studies, but someone comes to you and asks you to do something when you have that time scheduled, your answer is no. I'm sorry, I already have something scheduled. Can we do it another time instead? As Greg McKeown says in this book, play doesn't just help us to explore what is essential, it is essential in and of itself. So what things excited you when you were a kid? What things did you like to play? Because all of us like to play something when we were children. Maybe it was sports. Maybe it was some type of pretending. Maybe we liked to read things. Maybe we liked watching movies. Maybe we liked listening to music. There are all sorts of things that really resonated and excited us as children. And your task is to recreate that in your world today, to tap back into those things that really excited you when you were a child, those things that you can find some way to play in today. Well, that's going to end up our episode on play. you have any comments for me, would love to hear them. I'm trying to get much better about responding to you guys. If you contact me in some way, this is kind of the new mantra, I think, for me with the podcast and on the blog site is I want to have a better connection with you and to better respond to you. If you have any questions for me, any comments, good or bad, why don't you email me? Email me at brandonvaughn.com, VAUGHN. Hopefully in a week or two, if you go to firstthingsproductivity.com, I'll have a contact tab. You can click that and it will basically email me on that email address. Reach out to me on Twitter, reach out to me on Facebook, and let me know how things are going. Leave me a comment on my blog site, and I'm trying to do better about responding to those things. Would love to hear from you. Let me know what's up. Let me know what's going on with you guys, what things you're dealing with, anything that I've said that helped you, or if you have questions about certain things, just would love to know about that. And then next week, we're going to be back, and we're going to be in Chapter 8 of this book. If you don't have this book, what on earth are you waiting for? This is a great book. They're very short chapters, very easy to read. It's called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. You can find it anywhere. I bet you can go to your local bookstore today and find a copy of this book. If not, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on iTunes, you can get it anywhere. If you go to my website again, firstthingsproductivity.com/59, you'll find a link to that book at the very bottom of the page. But next week, we're talking about something I've wanted to talk about for a long, long time, and that is the issue of sleep. Sleep. Oh man, I've struggled so much with this because I hate sleep. I'll be honest with you. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to sleep. I need to stay up and spend 5 more hours doing something. And now I'm getting my groove going. I don't want to go to sleep. I really struggle with this thing. We're going to talk about some of my struggles, some of the science about sleep. We're going to hear some people talk about why we sleep and why it's needed in our lives. We're going to talk about all of that next week. And remember what I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. Please, 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 please go and take my survey. firstthingsproductivity.com/survey. Simple 10-question survey. Take you 5 or 10 minutes. I really want to hear from you guys. I really want to know what things matter to you, what things you're struggling with, what things you would like to hear more about, what things you would like to change about the show, anything like that. This is your opportunity. If you listen to me on a regular basis, this is your opportunity to speak into this show and help me shape it into the next level, to take it up to the next step on this journey that we are on. So please consider taking this survey. All right, so that's going to end us for today. You guys take care. We will be back here next week. Until then, take it easy. I'll see you.